Okay, so the principle of breath support invites us to consider the very fundamental aspect of breath as life. And it is what sort of connects us physiologically from even before we're born till our end of the time on this earth. And we can consider breath as a baseline for flow, for free flow in kind of Laban terms, but flow is a kind of more general concept of the kind of ongoingness of life. Bartenieff said that breath as the baseline for flow is the sort of central liberator and controller, which reminds us of flow not being this completely uncontrollable notion, but that we have an element of control. We can choose consciously to breathe in, we can choose to hold the breath. We can have this conscious and unconscious relationship to breath, which is what we'll explore today. And another element of the principle of breath support is how it gives us access to our inner space, which we will explore at the level of anatomy. I'll show some diagrams and we'll talk in terms of cells and lungs, but also to a more a kind of more spatial concept of inner dimensionality, of length, of width and breadth, as the beginnings of our exploration in space or in kinesphere, if we want to use Laban's terms. So that's where we're going, starting very inner and then eventually coming more outer into this inner-outer relationship of breath with space and as space. Okay, that's a lot of talking. Let's recuperate from that. Please go ahead and lie down somewhere or sit somewhere comfortably in your space. You don't need to see me for this next bit. So feel free to make yourself comfy somewhere. And as I'm sure you have done in many different classes of yoga or in dance or other somatic movement education classes, you will be asked to notice your breath. Arriving in how it is in this moment. And you can do that with your eyes open or eyes closed, however's comfortable for you. Where in your body is moving? Where is still? And you might take your attention to trillions of cells that make up your body. And remind yourself that they breathe you. They take in what they need, get rid of what they don't need, thousands of times a day. And you can shift and make yourself comfortable whenever you need to. Don't feel like you need to start to kind of build up tension in any position. But tapping into the sense of undifferentiated cellular breath. So not really doing anything in this moment, more a sense of being. And if you feel comfortable to do so, feel free to take a hiss on your exhale, so letting out some air with a sound. Sometimes releasing voice with breath can help release a bit of tension in the body. tension that perhaps you didn't even know was there. And you can take the hissing into some yawning or any other sounds that you would like to take. And go ahead and make some movement. Anything that would feel good right now, to shake, to press, to rock, to roll, to move your cells. Something that helps connect you to you. You might change your base of support, you might roll to one side or the other side or to your front surface. Take a moment very consciously breathing in and out in whatever tempo that is. So rather than allowing your body to breathe you direct a little bit. An inhale that grows and an exhale that shrinks. You can start to emphasize that sense of growing and shrinking and whatever movement supports that for you. Shrinking sense of spine, shortening, condensing into a small ball maybe, growing further out. In your own way, exploring the idea or the image of growing and shrinking from the breath, with the breath. And giving yourself somewhere to grow from by shrinking, or giving yourself somewhere to return to by growing. And if you start to feel like you're making yourself lightheaded, do less. And if you haven't changed level, go ahead and explore what growing to change level might feel like, shrinking to change base of support. Considering how the torso grows and shrinks, how the rib cage mobilizes, how the action of the lungs and the diaphragm and the organs are responding to breath. We'll take one more moment of this growing and shrinking in your own way, and then we'll come to differentiate it with a little bit more specificity. You might notice a particular rhythm of your breath. A particular inner tempo of today. Great. And then find yourself eventually sitting somehow comfortably. Maybe on a pillow even, or on your shins, or with legs crossed. And we'll start to differentiate a little bit this inner space of the breath. First of all, by finding the side-sidedness, a relationship between the bony landmarks. If we were together, we would do this in partners with touch, so you could experience a surface on the parts of the body that I'm going to name. So this is an invitation for you to then shift your base of support whenever you would like, in order to feel instead like maybe your own hands on your body, but also you can choose to lie down on your side maybe, or on your back, or on your front to do this. So we'll start by a side-sidedness of the breath, coming into an awareness of the rib cage first of all. So as you breathe, you can feel this widening and narrowing of rib cage. And we can also recall the other bony landmarks involved in this. You can bring your hands to the collarbones in the front as well. And remember that we have this tiny joint right at the sternum where the two collarbones are meeting. And it's not designed for a huge amount of movement, but we can still find some movement there because of the breath. And imagine this space widening and narrowing. And you might feel it also going forward and back. That's perfectly normal also. But you're trying to invite that sense of widening and then narrowing. And it's pretty hard to touch your own shoulder blades, but you can imagine them for yourself in your mind's eye, also gliding on the rib cage a little bit. If you wish to lie down or take child's pose or some other position where you might feel your ribs and your shoulder blades moving a little bit, that could be helpful. And then the other bony landmark you may wish to visualize or consider is the pelvis. So we have at the two sides of the sacrum, the sacroiliac joints. Again, they're not designed to move a lot. But because of the diaphragm moving the organs down into the belly, we have this change of pressure amongst those bones. And we might even sense a widening and narrowing through the bones of the pelvis, maybe. If you don't sense anything, that's also fine. You can take your mind there, your mind's eye there. And have a little explore with side-sidedness, a breathing that has this horizontal aspect. It might help to change your base of support at any moment. Sometimes lying on the side, you can feel how the growing and shrinking is more apparent because of the increased pressure on the ground. You might want to exaggerate the breath to feel more movement, but don't give yourself a head rush by doing that. And you might feel that this movement is very small, and that's totally fine also. And if you wish to sigh or yawn at any time, make some sound or vocalizations, feel free. So we're using this quite geometric notion of a horizontal awareness relative to our body's form as a way of inviting a differentiation of our whole, to find these different parts of the skeletal architecture with lungs, diaphragm, psoas, other muscles that are connected to the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm. Let's shift the awareness from the side-sidedness of breath to the forward and backness, the sagittal aspect. So lying on your back or lying on your front might be helpful here. Placing a hand on your breastbone or on your belly might also be quite handy. To shift your awareness now to the front and the back surface, to the breastbone, to the thoracic spine, to the sacrum, to the pubic symphysis. And feeling this bulging and hollowing towards the front surface of your body and to the back surface. And seeing if you can make as much movement of back body as front body. Again, changing your base of support when you need to, finding a different pressure of your body in relationship to gravity to find something to sense in connection and mobilize away from or towards. Great, and let's shift the attention to the kind of third inner axis that we can explore, which is our relationship to up-down, to this vertical dimension. it can be useful to lie with your head almost touching something, lying on your side. So if I think about it, sort of lying here, maybe with my hand under my arm. If the top of your skull is almost touching another surface, if you're lying on your side, you can inhale and lengthen and maybe make contact, or feel the contact increasing with that pressure. Or you can explore it seated, or just lying on your side, or lying on your back also. And so sensing this lengthening of the spine with the inhale, and a shortening or a shrinking of the spine with an exhale. And if you've done a lot of ballet or modern dance or even yoga in your experience, then this sense of lengthening is probably quite familiar. And give yourself the opportunity to find an exhale and find the shrinking. You don't need to stay that vertical all the time. If you're lying on your side, you might notice the lengthening towards your head as well as towards your tailbone. Or maybe you're sensing it more towards the skull. Visualizing the spaces between the vertebrae, these discs, inflating, deflating. Great. And just take a recuperation, however you would like to recuperate. Breathe however you would like. Maybe open your eyes, take a little shake. We're going to put those three together in a moment. See how that feels, but just take a little refresh from concentrating inner. So we just visited and differentiated side-sidedness, forward and backness, up and downness, horizontal, sagittal, vertical. Please start with the one that you felt was really familiar. So if breathing side-side felt, yeah, I live there, that one's great. Start there. If that's not where it feels super familiar, find the one that does. If they all feel great or familiar, just pick one. But we're going to add them up. So choose where you would like to be in the room, lying on the ground, standing, sitting, wherever is comfortable. To pay attention to this very specific inner work. So breathing into one dimension first. I'm going to stay with side-sidedness because that one feels loud in my awareness today, but it might be different for you. And then invite another dimension to that. So you might be widening and bulging, or lengthening and bulging, or lengthening and widening at the same time. And then when that feels relatively familiar, please add the third one. Widening, bulging, and lengthening at the same time, and then narrowing, hollowing, shortening at the same time. And feel free to change base of support whenever you would like. And gradually refinding this sense of growing and shrinking with your movement as a result of this breath. Inhaling to grow, exhaling to shrink, and that might start to invite some level change, shift of base of support. Finding an extending of limbs away from core. Finding them returning back towards navel center, maybe. Sense of easy growing and shrinking. And if you're in standing or sitting, you might also play with this image of rising and inhaling, shrinking, sinking with an exhale. Or advancing a little bit, or retreating a little bit, spreading yourself wide. So finding something that feels like it inhabits this image of growing and shrinking, shrinking and growing, with this support of your inner dimensionality of breath. With a sense of flow in it. You might be more asymmetrical on your base of support. And for a moment, let's shift the pattern so that you grow with your body movement, with your body action, but you exhale and you inhale and find a body action of getting smaller, of flexing, of condensing, but with an inhale. And then exhaling to grow. And then the opposite, shrinking and inhaling. And then returning to the first version of finding a growing in kinesphere, growing to this further reaches of your space with an inhale, and then exhaling to shrink. And if your eyes aren't open, explore this with your eyes open so that you have a bit of light coming in, a bit of orientation in the space. Feel free to take whatever movement you would like to take that explores this connection of breath support for a growing or a shrinking, shifting, rolling. I would like us to explore some of the kind of Bartenieff fundamental patterns of movement with breath support as the key focus. So we'll start with one that is referred to very functionally as the pre-thigh lift, before the thigh lift. Lying with my legs in parallel, palms by my sides, palms up, palms down, however I wish. I'm going to inhale to prepare. Exhale, right at the end of the exhale, simply draw my heel towards my sitting bone. Inhale to return. Exhale, slide my heel. Inhale and return. So it's very simple, but I'm wanting that you hopefully find it with as minimal amount of muscular exertion as possible so that we can tap into actually activating the psoas. And we can, the thing I wanted to read was that where is it? The psoas, so our deepest postural muscle, and it's the most efficient flexor of the hip because of its attachment to the spine and the upper leg, is easier to engage when the psoas is, it's easier to engage the psoas during an exhale when the thoracic diaphragm is moving upwards, due to the relaxation phase and pressure that is no longer bulging in the abdomen. So go ahead and see how that feels. And if you're sticking to the floor because your feet are sweaty and you're on wood or lino, put some socks on. If you're on a yoga mat, you might want to roll onto some ground so you've got a bit of sliding capacity. So simply right at the end of the exhale, sliding one heel towards your sitting bone. If it helps to place your hands on your belly or on your rib cage to remind yourself of this shortening and shrinking Go ahead and do that. And then inhaling, feeling that movement of diaphragm, of organs of the belly, moving the hip socket even. So this very simple action of flexing in the hip, the knee and the ankle, coordinated with the end of the exhale. There's something about this simplicity of simply flexing the leg that has all of this complexity of phrasing and the timing of the breath in it. And as you extend the leg away from the pelvic floor, away from the sitting bones, how can you keep that extension with the inhale active all the way until the end, and it doesn't drop into kind of passive weight near the end as you kind of give up your weight to gravity? Can you still find this as an active movement, even though the inhale might give you that sense of free flow into relaxing at the end? So there's a bit of spatial intent out through the heel, maybe out through the spine. So doing one leg and the other leg. Maybe having the non-active leg in the bent supine hook position or extended long. Great, and we'll recuperate from that with some heel rock. So extending the legs long, anchoring on the heel bone, flexing and extending at the ankle joints. So this rocking of sequencing from lower to upper, from heels through to sitting bones, through to skull. And as you take this heel rock, can you find it with this three-dimensional breath of widening, lengthening, bulging? How does changing the breath change your experience of the movement? So we can change the breath to change the sensation of the movement, and we can also just change the movement to change the experience of breath. And if doing the heel rock with extended legs is more uncomfortable for your lower spine, feel free to bend the knees and take a flat-footed version of the heel rock, pressing from the soles of the feet. That's also an option here. As is changing the rhythm of your heel rock, taking a hiss, finding some voice again. Great. And then coming into a big X position on the ground. Let's take an exhale that brings us up into a small wall. And then take a knee drop to prop yourself up on one elbow. So I made a little ball and then I took a knee drop to find myself resting on my forearm. Let's take some arm circles here. So I'm going to trace my arm in a circle around me. Pretty much as the title arm circle implies. But I'm going to explore softening a bit at my elbow so there's more of a sense of carving the space around me. And also finding how my spine and torso wants to accommodate this rotation. Connect to your breath. How can you make this movement even more full by spending time with the inhale, with that widening, bulging and lengthening through breath? And how does an exhale here at this moment help you condense, hollow, shorten a little bit to find another part of this arm circle after the inhale to give yourself somewhere to go from. So finding your base of support firmly in contact with the earth to find this mobilization of the upper arm that also might mobilize into the spine. I'm not fussy right now as to whether your lower pelvis gets more involved with an arching and a tilting. Whatever feels interesting here for breath support is going to be your task. What I mean by that is that you can be like, way, and kind of really flexing into the back space, or you can be more stable in the lower pelvis and find more of the rib cage opening. What I'm curious about is how you can really activate all parts of the circle. So you might want to cut off a little bit, see if you can use the movement and the breath to fulfill that arc in space. And if you've gone one direction enough, change direction. The palm is alive, recording all of your cells breathing with space. And the eyes are open, following the hand as much as possible. And when you've done enough on that side, finding a knee drop to the other side, propping yourself up on your forearm, and exploring again this simple body action of arcing the whole wing of the arm in space and indulging in breath support. Finding it more than a simply mechanical exercise and going, okay, what happens if I just find a bit more widening or bulging or lengthening in that little fraction of my kinesphere, tiny little parts of it, to see where the movement can inhabit. It's not about necessarily reaching far, but about feeling this three-dimensionality of your core, of your torso, to see what the possibility of this wing of the arm is. Especially in the back space, especially in that space behind you. Tracing the hand with the eyes, or mobilizing the skull with the hand. Exploring sometimes more of an extension through the elbow, maybe exploring something more soft through the elbow. And we didn't do it on the first side, but we will in a minute. So let's take a little recuperation. Threading that arm through the gap into a deep twist. And pausing there to feel how it feels. Notice what your breath does to this shape. Where is moving, where is still. Even in this rotation, how can you find widening, lengthening, bulging? And when you feel like that's enough on being in a deep rotation on that side, go ahead and shift to the other side. Even yourself out by taking a little thread of the hand through that gap and taking a pause in that deep rotation. And maybe it's uncomfortable to have your head fully rotated, you're resting on another part of your skull, whatever works for your body in that shape. One more breath there, and then easing into your base of support to pull yourself back out of the ground. And taking a little moment for yourself with whatever feels like it's calling. A couple of minutes of just dancing, moving, stretching, wriggling, connecting to breath, to reconnect to the space around you, that arm circle helping bridge this inner and outer flow of breath, hopefully a little bit more in your sensation. And now just free it up. Where do you want to go? How do you want to move? Maybe it's more familiar movement to you, maybe it's less familiar movement. And then let's gather back at the screen. Have a little chat as we end.